In this section, I'm going to show you how to set up an audio interface within Sonar. By an audio interface, I mean a device that you use to listen back to Sonar or that you use to input the signal into Sonar for recording. Whether that is an internal sound card, perhaps PCI or PCIe, or an external sound card, or any other device, such as a mixer attached by USB or FireWire, the process is the same. To start with, we select Edit Preferences from the main menu or press P. As you can see, the Audio Device tab is selected by default. To the right, we can see the input drivers and the output drivers for any audio devices attached to the computer. And notice that one device may have several drivers depending on the number of inputs and outputs it has. If your audio device isn't listed here, it is not installed correctly in Windows, you will need to exit Sonar and reinstall the device. Until it shows in this list, you will not be able to use it. If you have more than one audio device attached and you are in ASIO mode, one of them will be grayed out and unselectable. If the grayed out device is the one you want to use, you will need to completely deselect the currently selected drivers. Once all of the drivers have been deselected, the previously grayed out drivers now become available for selection. Notice that as I select them, the other device's drivers become grayed out. I've already mentioned one of the driver modes, ASIO. The other recommended driver mode for use within Sonar is WDM. There is no right or wrong, but you'll probably find one of these modes works better with your device than the other. Try them both and see which works best for you. To change mode, we switch to the Playback and Recording tab, then we can change it from the drop-down choices here. The other two modes are not recommended and are there mainly for backwards compatibility. We will select WDM mode, then press Apply. Then the Wave Profiler will ask if we wish to analyse our drivers. If it does this, press Yes. If it doesn't, your system has already been tested, perhaps at first startup, for example. Once the profiler has run, click on Close. You'll see that Sonar now complains about a missing audio device. This is normal when changing driver modes, as it can no longer find the unavailable driver. To the right is a drop-down where we can reassign the missing device, which will be shown in brackets. If you are changing modes permanently, this is where you reassign the device to the one you wish to use. You would normally select the device you wish to use for your main outs. Now I'll switch back to the Devices tab. And here we can see the WDM drivers that are now available for selection. The main difference between ASIO and WDM modes is that in WDM mode you can select more than one device at a time. However, you will need to have a common clock for them both, and one should slave to the other, which will be the master device. Without a common clock, you'll have timing problems and the audio will drift apart on playback. WDM doesn't work very well on my system, so I'm going to switch back to ASIO mode. Once you've made your mode selection, the following process is the same, whichever you choose. The ZR16 has several inputs and outputs, and I select all of the ones that I want to use. I also have a Roland Sonic Cell attached, and once I've selected the Z's drivers, the Sonic Cell drivers become unavailable. Once you've made your driver selection, you may like to change the names to something more user-friendly. To do that, double-click on the driver name underneath the Friendly Names column, and this will allow us to change the names to something that makes more sense. I've changed my first inputs to Z12, indicating that that is the first stereo pair. I'll rename all the other input and output drivers that I'm going to use. Once that is done, when you select input and output drivers from within Sonar, this is the name that will be displayed instead of the full driver name. To make sure the friendly names are used, you need to make sure that the Use Friendly Names to Represent Audio Drivers box is checked. If you wish to use mono outputs as well as stereo pairs, you need to check the Show Mono Output box. This may be useful if you have a mixer, for example, and you want to run a track to a mono channel on it. Now that we've made the mode selection and selected the inputs and outputs we want to use, let's have a look at some of the other settings. We click on the Driver Settings tab to reveal more audio driver options. If you are in ASIO mode, the Playback Timing Master and Record Timing Master choices should be set automatically. If in WDM mode, you need to make sure that these are set to your master device. The audio driver bit depth may be greyed out depending on your audio interface. If it is not set here, it will need to be set from within your audio interface software or perhaps on the device itself. The 64-bit double precision engine checkbox can be left unchecked as it can be selected in the export dialog when needed. However, if you want to run at 64-bit precision all the time, check this box. Panning laws and dim solo gain we'll look at later. The sampling rate for new projects is set here. I use 44.1. You may prefer something different depending on what your audio interface supports. That is selected from the drop down here. The mixing latency setting is very important, especially if you use a lot of soft synths or direct monitor from within Sonar. You'll then need to have your latency as low as possible. The slider will only be available in WDM mode. Sliding it to the right will increase the latency, but put less strain on your system, so there's less chance of getting pops and crackles or dropouts. Sliding it to the left will reduce latency, but may cause playback problems. The ASIO latency is adjusted via your device interface, which is accessed via the ASIO panel button. Here is my device panel, where I can adjust the buffer size if I wish, and once I close this panel, we'll return to the preferences where any changes made in the panel will be reflected. The trick is to find a balance between low latency and trouble-free playback and recording.